Hey folks, Fernando doing another video for the Modern Survivalists. Stick around for this video, especially if you own a Glock. I'm going to be going through what would basically be the 5 parts that you definitely want to have in a Glock spare part kit, especially for like a survival kit for your Glock, thinking of things that could probably go wrong in a pistol, and which would be the parts that you want to have just in case. Of course, even better, have a complete new Glock, having another Glock. That's the best spare part kit for you. But still, valid question, what would be like the top 5 parts that you want to stock just in case? Okay, so this is a topic that's a little bit controversial, especially because of the people that think they know what they're talking about when they actually don't. My experience and my background on this is the following. I've been shooting Glock pistols for over 20 years. I've been professionally dedicated to survival and preparedness for many years as well. People actually pay me for my advice and my recommendations as to all of this. Besides that, I've also have the Glock Armorer's course taking and still valid, that has a 5-year lifespan, so to speak, and it's still in place. So that is my background in terms of Glock. Having said all that, a lot of this you have to actually dig and find information yourself. During the Glock Armorer's course that I did, I actually asked this question: which are the parts that fail the most often? I didn't get an actual clean, straight cut answer to that question, and it may be because of the person that was giving the course, or maybe even from a business company side of, we don't talk about anything defective or bad in our guns, which I kind of understand. Having said all that, guns are complex tools that have parts are going to be wearing, and that's simply the nature of the thing. You're going to be using it, and there's parts that are going to be wearing out or need to be replaced every once in a while. So in our top 5 list, first, number 1 is something that's common basically with all firearms that I've ever used. I mean, I started with 1911s all the way through high powers, and pretty much anything that you could get in between of that. Guns simply will need some maintenance every certain 1,000 of rounds. The Glock pistol is probably the most reliable, most trusted firearm you can have these days. It's simply the way it is. It's been perfected over years, and even though it seems very tiny little differences, those generations have always been about improving little details that, could be improved on. So the idea of Glock perfection, some people kind of laugh at it. They've actually been perfecting the pistol for many years, and they've done a great job. The Generation 5 Glock is actually their best Glock. This is Gen 4, still a very good pistol. I have no problem with it, but that's the way it is. So, number 1, springs. My advice is get a complete set of springs for all the springs in your gun. That's something that's going to be needing replacing every 5,000 rounds, every 10,000 rounds, and anyone that's doing competition will probably do this like every 10,000 rounds or whatever, going to be replacing that. There's been cases of people that had a spring break after a couple thousand rounds. May well be the case, can happen. You'll always have that possibility of some little micro crack or whatever, or a little defect in the material, and it just ends up happening. Okay. Having said that, which is the spring that gets replaced the most? And this is based on stuff that I've read online from people that work like in police departments. Usually in a police department, in a city or a town, you're usually going to be having like the cop that is more gun savvy, and he's going to be sent to take the armorer's course, for example, the Glock armorer's course, and with that information, he's going to be replacing parts and bits in the pistols of everyone in the department. And some of those folks will tell you, yeah, the thing that I end up replacing the most is this or that. Well, the thing that most often ends up being breaks and needs replacing is the trigger spring. That little spring right there. So you just push those pins, you pull it up, and you get that spring, which is actually this tiny spring. So this would be number 1, the part that needs replacement the most. Again, get a complete set of springs for all the springs in the pistol. It's not that many of them, and usually they're going to be selling those together if you buy the full kit. But this would be the one that most often needs replacement. Again, with new generations, it's been improved and made better and more reliable, but probably still the more common part that ends up being replaced. Okay. Number 2, And this is not only just about parts that end up breaking, but parts that end up getting lost. For example, let's say you broke the trigger spring, you disassemble your Glock, and you lose one of these pins. Well, you still need to replace it. It doesn't matter if it didn't break, but you actually lost it. You still need to replace that pin. It has happened that pins also do break, and one of the improvements this was very, well, maybe more common, not very common. There's nothing particularly bad with any Glock of any generation, but there was a time in which, especially with a Glock 40, right, that has a bit more recoil and a bit more stress, when using just one pin, that pin would, every once in a while, a broken pin would happen, especially with a 40. Could happen with any other gun as well. One of the improvements was that they added 2 pins instead of having one. Still, one of those pins that you just want to have. And for just a few bucks, you get, again, a full set of pins, so as to replace any pin that ends up being broken or more likely ends up getting lost. I've heard sometimes about people having the block break, this metal block here. Really not all that common, I would say, but I've heard of some people that have had that happen. Yeah, that would be number 2. Number 3, and we're still talking about springs, but number 3 would be the recoil spring assembly, right? This assembly is something that eventually, with the wear and tear of the gun, you're gonna be replacing. Now, this has been improved a lot during the later generations. There was a big change from Gen 3 Glocks, which was like a polymer rod with a captive spring. That would end up breaking a bit more often, I guess, I would assume. I mean, I had no problem with mine after thousands of rounds, but I've read about people that, yeah, every once in a while, one of those would break, need replacement. So you had a spare one. This is quite an improvement from the Gen 3, and this is a lot more rugged, a lot more resistant. There's been a little thing that they did in which some of the first ones of these that they came up with, it had just, I'm not sure you get to see it there. So this was all polymer and it would break here. So they added a reinforcement so as to make it even more resistant. And this little group here is super, super tough, yet you still want to have a replacement eventually when it starts wearing out. It's not that it's going to be breaking all that, it's not commonly something that ends up breaking all that much. Could still happen, I guess, but it's more about the wear of the pistol after, several thousand rounds that you put through your gun. All right. Let's move on to number 4 when we're talking about your extractor. Again, things that have been improved and they're bomb proof, but every once in a while someone, a chipped or maybe not so much broken, but a chipped extractor may well be the case. Okay, you hear about that. So an extractor and the plunge, the spring that goes in here, that would be in your set of springs. But every once in a while, an extractor, and this is going to be user depending as well, especially if you use, for example, a Wolf steel case ammunition, let's just say. The Glock is perfectly capable of shooting all the steel case ammo you want, but there's a simple fact of life, which is steel is tougher and stronger than brass. So I can completely understand why this would wear faster if you use steel ammo, or if there's a little micro crack or whatever here, it ends up breaking sooner if you use steel instead of using a brass case ammunition. So that will be number 4. Number 5 will be the firing pin itself. Not as common really nearly as the springs breaking. Guys, springs not only break all of a sudden for whatever reason, they just wear. In my experience with guns in general, from 1911s to high powers and everything in between, any gun that I've ever came across and ended up using, it's always about the spring. I mean, I've had a high power that was not working properly. I just grabbed the slide spring, stretched it a little bit like that, and it kept on running just fine. Of course, that's not actually a solution. You better replace that. But what I mean is springs is usually the thing that goes wrong with most guns in general. Okay. So yeah, the firing pin, again, one of those things that has been improved over the years and such. And so as to disassemble the slide, you just pull back, pull down on that plastic sleeve so as to relieve the tension, and then you can pull this what's called like a cap, or anyway, that thing that you have there, and you remove. So the spring that goes, that's the spring. Let me remove this. So this is the firing pin group with a spring. So you, as I was saying before, you have a set of springs for all of these. This is a good idea to buy the entire set, the entire firing pin or striker assembly. Have it just like this, so as to replace completely if you have, and then you have some little spare parts there. There you have the plunger, the spring is going to be putting tension on your extractor, right? Anyway, this you want to keep super clean. You don't want anything messing with grease or oil. Just leave it clean as it is. It's self-lubricating because it's plastic here, so don't mess with that. One of the things that happens, and this happened in the armorer's class, is that these cups, when you pull this back, this is actually a cup that splits in half. So these are very tiny, easy to lose parts. So you want to have either those parts specifically, or as I was saying before, the entire assembly together. So number 5, the firing pin itself, it may chip, it may break. If you're using like tough primers in your reloads or surplus ammunition or whatever, maybe a bit more likely to wear it or chip it or break it. Even if it chips a little bit and becomes a little bit more pointy, it just may punch a hole in your primers when shooting. Whatever reason, you want to have one of these to replace just in case, all right? That would be basically it. I mean, man, the best thing is to have an entire complete pistol just in case anything goes wrong, but this is mostly it. These are the parts that, based on what I know, end up being lost or broken or need replacement more often, I would say. I'm trying to do this with a table that rotates on me. So yeah, so as to assemble this again, you just push down there and you pull that right there, and with your Glock tool you just push there, and once you click it, there it goes, okay? Those are the things that apparently end up breaking the most. Again, mostly springs, a few of those little parts, and I insist, a complete pistol is always the best way, especially when you get it like a used Glock. If you find, I know that these days it's really not all that common, but yeah, a spare gun entirely. Finally, a bonus point here for spare parts: get a ton of spare mags. This is also one of the parts that fails the most. I know that in guns in general, especially with your older guns, it would be the part that fails the most often. When anyone has a problem with a 1911, usually it's the magazine, really. Especially those 1911 mags, metal lips and such, you know, any little bit of a bend, especially if you bought a pile like I did myself back in the day, surplus magazines. Surplus magazines will probably give you a headache, no doubt. They've been beating around quite a bit. Your high powers, any metal mag that you're buying used, surplus and such, likely to be the cause of any problem you're having if it's not linked to a weak or a spring that needs replacement. Still, for your Glock pistol, have plenty of spare mags. It may be a weak spring, but for the price of it, get an entire new mag, so you're not messing around with with what may be wrong with it. If you want to have a few spare springs for a magazine in your spring kit, by all means go for it, but I think it's a good idea to have plenty of these around. Folks, if you're interested in this sort of thing, Street Survival Skills, Modern Survival Manual, or books, links for that in Amazon, following the link below. See you on our next video. Have an awesome day. Take care.